talk about transformational leadership. Transformational leadership gives more attention to the charisma and affective elements of leadership. It's a popular theory nowadays that emphasizes intrinsic motivation in followers' development, and the reason it's so popular is because it fits today's work groups who want to be inspired and empowered to succeed in times of uncertainty. Transformational leadership is a process that changes and transforms people. It's concerned with emotions, values, standards, ethics, and long-term goals. It assesses followers' motives, satisfies their needs, and treats them as human beings. It's an exceptional form of influence that moves followers to accomplish more than what is expected of them, and it's often charismatic and visionary. So Burns elaborated a little bit on the previous work that had been done by scholars, and he distinguished between transactional and transformational leadership. Transactional is an exchange of something for an employee's performance. For an example, it might be something like you could get promoted if you perform well. It could also be like a politician promising to lower taxes if they get elected. It's like exchange of something for another thing. And transformational leadership is when a person engages with others and creates a connection that raises the level of motivation and morality in both the leader and the follower. It's attentive to the needs of followers and tries to help them reach their fullest potential. And the morality part is really important, and they talked about this a little bit in the book as well. And the book, by the way, is Leadership by Peter G. Northouse. But they talk about how, like, for example, Adolf Hitler, even though he transformed things, he could not be seen as a transformational leader because the morality piece is missing. And so they coined a separate term called pseudo-transformational leadership, which applies to those unethical ones that are transformative. So you definitely don't want to be the unethical ones. So House published a theory that about charismatic leadership, which is pretty much the same thing as transformational leadership. And charisma is used to describe a special gift that certain individuals possess that gives them the capacity to do extraordinary things. Some of those personality characteristics include being dominant, having a strong desire to influence others, being self-confident, and having a strong sense of one's own moral values. But in addition to that, they also demonstrate specific behaviors. One of the behaviors is that they're strong role models for the beliefs and values they want their followers to adopt. For example, Gandhi advocated nonviolence and was a good role model of civil disobedience, and so he modeled the behavior that he wanted the followers to adapt. The second behavior is that they appeared competent to their followers. They articulate ideological goals and have moral overtones. Fourth, charismatic leaders communicate high expectations for followers, and they exhibit confidence in followers' abilities to meet these expectations. The impact of that is to increase the followers' sense of confidence and self-efficacy, which in turn improves their performance. Fifth, charismatic leaders arouse task-relevant motives in followers that may include affiliation, power, or esteem. A good example of that would be like John F. Kennedy saying, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And the effects on followers are listed here too, which we went through some of those. So Bass is another scholar on transformational leadership, and he argued that transformational leadership motivates followers to do more by raising their levels of consciousness about the value, goals, getting followers to transcend their own self-interest for the sake of the team, and moving followers to address higher level needs. And the model incorporates 7 different factors, which we will go through on the next slides coming up. So first there's the transformational leadership factors, which are idealized influence and charisma, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualized consideration. The transactional leadership factors are contingent reward, constructive transactions, management by exception, which there is an active and passive form of that, and then corrective transactions. And the last one is on the furthest right of the scale, and it's the laissez-faire leadership, which is basically like no leadership, but it is a laissez-faire leadership style and the non-transactional style. So the first transformational leadership factor is the idealized influence, which is the charismatic elements of transformational leadership, and it's also an emotional component of leadership. Leaders act as strong role models for followers. The followers identify with the leader and they want to be like them or imitate their behaviors. They usually have high moral, ethical standards of conduct and can be counted on to do the right thing. They're deeply respected by followers who place a lot of trust in the leader. It gives followers a vision and sense of mission. And it's measured in two components. There's an attributional and a behavioral component. The attributional component focuses on the attributions of leaders based on the perceptions followers have of the leader, and the behavioral component is based on followers' observations of the leader's behavior. This style basically describes leaders who are special and who make others want to follow the vision they put forward. An example would be Nelson Mandela. He was the first non-white president of South Africa. He had high moral standards and a vision for South Africa that resulted in change in how they are governed. He had charismatic qualities, and people's response to them transformed the entire nation. The next factor is inspirational motivation. Inspirational motivation is where leaders communicate high expectations to followers and inspires followers by motivating them to become committed and part of the shared vision of the organization. Leaders use symbols and emotional appeals to focus group members' efforts to achieve more than they would in their own self-interest, which enhances the team spirit. An example of this would be like a sales manager who motivates with encouraging words and pep talks that clearly communicate how they play an important role in the future growth of the company. And I think with the sales too, that would help with the high expectations as well on how that's emphasized. The next factor is intellectual stimulation, and that's leadership that stimulates followers to be innovative and creative, and it challenges their own beliefs and values as well as those of the leader in the organization. These kind of leaders support followers and encourage them to try new approaches and develop innovative ways to deal with organizational issues. It encourages followers to think and problem solve. An example would be like a plant manager who promotes workers' individual efforts to develop unique ways to solve problems that have caused issues with production. The next transformational factor is individualized consideration. This represents leaders who provide a supportive climate and listen to the individual needs of followers. Leaders act as coaches and advisors, and they assist their followers with becoming fully actualized. They may use delegation as a technique to help followers grow through personal challenges by basically assigning them a task so that they can grow and get through that. An example would be like a manager who takes time to treat each employee in a caring and unique way. They may use specific directives with a high degree of structure with some team members, or they may also give strong affiliation. So it just depends, I think, on the follower and their needs. So now we're going to talk about the transactional leadership factors, and they differ from transformational leaders because transactional leaders do not individualize needs of subordinates or focus on their personal development. Transactional leaders exchange things of value with subordinates to advance their own and their subordinates' agendas. They're still able to influence because it is in the best interest of the employee to do what the leader wants. So there are two different transactional factors. There's contingent reward and management by exception. Contingent reward is exchanged by leader and follower efforts from followers when they receive specified rewards in exchange for their efforts. It tells followers what they need to do and what the payoffs will be for doing it. An example of this would be like a parent negotiating with their child about how many hours of video games they can play after they get done practicing the violin, for example. Management by exception involves constructive criticism, negative reinforcement, and negative feedback. And there's two forms of that, which is active and passive. Active management by exception is when managers follow closely, watching for mistakes of employees to break the rules, and then takes corrective action. An example of this would be like a sales manager observing followers' daily approach with customers and then quickly correcting the followers who don't approach the customer in the desired manner. The passive form of management by exception would be when a manager only intervenes after standards have not been met or problems have arisen. An example of this would be like a supervisor who gives a poor performance review to an employee without ever having talked to the employee about their performance prior to the review. The next leadership factor is laissez-faire, which is like non-leadership. And yeah, this factor represents the absence of leadership. It's a hands-off approach and just kind of let things ride. Does not take responsibility. The leader delays decisions. They give no feedback, and they make little effort to help followers satisfy their needs. There's no exchange with followers or help with growth. An example of this would be like a president of a small manufacturing firm that calls no meetings with plant managers, has no long-range plan for the firm, and makes little contact with employees. So another study that was done by Bennis and Nannis, and it asked 90 leaders basic questions such as what are your strengths and weaknesses, what past events most influenced your leadership approach, and what were the critical points in your career. And it was interesting because from that they found these factors that were used by successful transformational leaders in the organizations. And so the 4 common strategies that were used by leaders in transforming organizations were vision. The leaders had a clear vision, one that was simple, beneficial, and created energy of the future of the organization. The vision compelled employees to support the organization by touching on their experiences in relation to the vision. The clear vision then helped employees understand how they fit in with the overall direction of the organization and society. It empowers employees because they feel like they are part of a worthwhile organization. They did say as well that in order to be successful, the vision needs to grow out of the needs of all of the organization and be claimed by all the employees within it. The emergence of vision originates from the leaders and the followers. The next one was social architects, which they're social architects for the organization, meaning that they create shape or form for shared meanings people share within the organization. And they communicated direction that changed values and norms. They also found that they have trust. So they create trust in their organizations by making their own positions known and sticking to them. They're predictable and reliable even in situations that are uncertain. They articulate consistent and are consistently implementing the direction, even when the vision involves a high degree of uncertainty. The last one was creative development of self through positive regard. Leaders know their strengths and weaknesses and emphasize their strengths instead of just focusing on their weaknesses. Because they have this awareness and are competent, it helps the leader immerse themselves in tasks and goals of the organization. It fuses their sense of self with work, as well as the sense of self of the followers in their work. The positive self-regard has a positive impact on followers, creating feelings of confidence and high expectations. Leaders are committed to learning and relearning, which results in a consistent focus on education throughout the organization. Kutzes and Posner also came up with their own model, and this was developed from interviewing more than 1,300 middle and senior level managers in private and public sector organizations and asking them to describe their personal best experiences as leaders. And they came up with these 5 fundamental practices that enable leaders to accomplish extraordinary things. The first one is model the way, which the leader is clear about their own values and philosophy. They find their own voice and express it to others. They lead by example, and they follow through on promises and commitments and affirm the common values that they share with others. The next one is they inspire a shared vision. They create compelling visions that guide people's behavior. They visualize positive future outcomes and communicate that to others. They listen to the dreams of others and show them how their dreams can be realized. They challenge others to transcend the status quo, to do something for others through their inspiring visions. The next one is that they challenge the process. They're willing to challenge the status quo and step into the unknown. They're willing to innovate, grow, and improve. They want to experiment and try new things. They're willing to take risks to improve things. And when they take risks one step at a time to learn from their mistakes along the way. The next one is that they enable others to act. They're effective at working with people. They build trust with others and encourage followers and everyone to collaborate. They listen to everyone's diverse points of view and treat people with dignity and respect. They allow people to make decisions and they support them. They create an environment where people feel good about their work and how they are contributing to the greater good. The last one is that they encourage the heart. They reward others for their accomplishments. People want to be supported and recognized. Effective leaders know this, and they're willing to give praise to employees for a job well done. They show appreciation and encouragement to others, including through having authentic celebrations. They create a greater collective identity and team spirit. The interesting thing about this theory is that it's not about personality but practice. Kutzes and Posner stressed that this model can be used by anyone to become a better leader. And that's all, folks. And again, this was taken from the Leadership textbook by Peter G. Northouse, and it's the 6th edition. And so this is just kind of a summary of the Transformational Leadership chapter.